I don't know how chicken breast became one of the standard cuts that beginner cooks reach for, but it is one of the hardest things to actually cook properly. There is very little fat, which means it tends to lack flavor and dry out. And on top of that, the uneven shape makes it almost impossible to cook evenly. But if you follow the tips in this video and avoid these classic beginner mistakes, not only will you end up with better chicken in your life, something we all could use, but you will be well on your way to unlocking the full potential of your cooking skills. For any experts that may be watching this, if you have a tip or trick that wasn't included in this video, please leave a comment below. Now let's get started. This first beginner mistake is near and dear to my heart, and that is skipping the seasoning. Lots of people ask for different spice blends they can use to bump up the flavor, thinking that cumin, paprika, and onion powder are going to somehow save the day. And while those things certainly help, they're not going to do anything if you don't have this. When experienced cooks talk about seasoning, they're not talking about different herbs and spices. They're talking about salt. And that's because it doesn't matter what you add to your chicken if you're missing this crucial ingredient. Salt doesn't just make foods taste salty. It actually increases every single one of the 5 basic flavors except for bitterness, which it reduces. Believe it or not, that chicken breast you may think of as bland is plenty flavorful, and you just need salt to unlock that flavor. To demonstrate that point, I've prepared 2 chicken breasts. One that is fully coated in 5 different spices, and the other one that just gets salt and pepper. While I can taste the different flavors of the spices, that taste is totally muted, and I can't taste the chicken at all. It tastes empty, it tastes boring. It's like taking a classic piece of art and sucking out all the color from it. The seasoned chicken is packed with flavor. It has a distinct, delicious chickeny taste, and it has what Samin Nosrat, the author of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, would call that zing of properly seasoned food. It is a night and day difference. If you add salt to your chicken right before you cook, it'll be properly seasoned and it'll taste fine. But if you want to get that nice flavor all the way through the cut of meat and you have the time, go ahead and season your chicken breast 30 minutes to an hour before you cook. Through osmosis, the salt will permeate through the entire breast and you'll end up with an even more flavorful result. Oh, and if you're using one of those salt grinders, you might want to watch this video to find out why that's not such a great idea. The next common mistake beginners make with their chicken breast is underestimating the importance of temperature. The internal temperature to which you bring your chicken breast is the determining factor as to whether your chicken is nice and juicy or bone dry. Because of the lack of fat in chicken breast, that margin for error is very, very small, within a few degrees. If you overcook it even a little bit, that chicken breast is going to be dry and not pleasant to eat, which is why the first thing I'm going to do is to tell you to go out and buy an instant read thermometer if you don't already have one. It may not be what you want to hear, but I need you to look me in the eyes when I say this. It is impossible for you to get a consistently good result cooking chicken breast without an instant read thermometer. You cannot do it. Any recipe that tells you 4 minutes per side or check how firm it is or anything like that, they are lying to you. Sure, those may be indicators, but with the different size of chicken breast, different types of stove, different types of pans you might be using, there are too many variables to have a hard and fast rule about when your chicken is actually done without checking the internal temperature. That is the only thing that will determine if the inside of your chicken is actually cooked. Hard stop. If you don't already have one, I've linked this one in the video description below. Now that we've established that, let's talk about what temperature you're actually looking for. 165 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature that most people think of as the safe temperature for chicken, is actually overcooked in a chicken breast. It's the temperature which harmful bacteria in chicken are killed instantly. But for each degree less than that, there's just a time that temperature needs to be maintained for it to have the same level of effectiveness. For example, a chicken that's cooked to 159 degrees just needs to hold that temperature for 17.3 seconds for it to have the same lethality to bacteria as if you cooked it to 165 degrees. In order to get the juiciest chicken breast possible, we're going to cook this to 155 degrees. You can see from this chart that the meat will need to maintain that temperature only for 45 seconds. Because of the residual heat from the pan, the chicken breast will actually maintain that temperature for much longer than the time needed. Here's a simple test to demonstrate this. The safe temperature of 155 degrees was maintained for much longer than the 45 seconds needed. This process is called carryover cooking, and we're going to end up with a much juicier, a much more tender chicken breast than if we went to 165. Now, if you're looking at your chicken breast, you might be wondering which part you're supposed to measure. You have this skinny part here and this thicker part here. And that is the next mistake I commonly see with chicken breast, ignoring the shape. If you cook a chicken breast just the way it is, it will be nearly impossible to cook evenly. Why is cooking evenly important? Well, let me show you. The thicker part is just above our target temperature, but look at the thinner part. over 180 degrees. That's going to be pretty dry. The answer to this problem is to flatten the chicken for uniform thickness. And the way you're going to have to do that is with blunt force. I'm not asking you to go out and buy a meat tenderizer. I don't even have one of those. What I do have is a rolling pin, which will work perfectly. If you don't have a rolling pin, you could use a bottle of wine or a heavy bottom pot. So after putting the chicken breast in between two pieces of plastic, I'm going to smack the thicker side until it gets about the same thickness as the thinner side. Don't go too crazy. We're not trying to flatten the whole thing out. We're just trying to get it more uniform. And with this profile, we'll get a much better result. Now that we have our even chicken breast, which is properly seasoned, and we know what temperature we need to get it to, it's time for the actual cooking. And if you want a nice sear with a proper temperature inside, you're going to have to preheat your pan. Start with a medium-low heat and let your pan sit for a couple of minutes. After your pan's been heating for a little while, you can turn up your heat to medium or medium-high and add your oil. And you do want a good amount of oil in your pan. Oil acts as a cooking medium and transfers heat directly to the chicken breast, which is what helps to get that really good browning. Once your oil starts to smoke up a little bit, it's time to add your chicken. Set it in your pan and don't move it at all for the first 2 minutes. This next part is a crucial part of cooking and what I see beginners struggle with all the time: proper heat control.
Control, you must learn control.
If after those first couple of minutes you turn your chicken and it is really dark, your heat's too high and you need to turn it down. If after a couple of minutes your chicken has turned white but isn't really browning at all, your heat's too low and you need to bring it up. Don't crank your burner all the way to its highest setting or its lowest setting. Pay attention to what's going in the pan and make adjustments as needed. Pan searing is a game of internal and external temperature. By the time your exterior has a nice brown crust, you want your interior to reach the target temp. If you have one without the other, the interior temperature is the most important. If your chicken looks a little pale but you've reached that 155 internal temp, pull it off the heat. If your chicken is looking really dark and the internal temp hasn't gotten there yet, the best thing to do is to take it off heat and throw it into a 350-degree oven until it's done. Alternatively, you can take everything off the heat, let everything cool down when you bring the burner to a lower temperature, and then finish the chicken on a lower temperature setting. By avoiding those 5 mistakes, you should be well on your way to getting a consistently flavorful and properly cooked chicken breast. If this information was helpful, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.